Welcome to Conscious Confidence Radio, a timeless wisdom with Sarah Main. Follow host Sarah Main on her ongoing journey of conscious confidence and gain timeless wisdom to unleash unparalleled confidence. A conscious confidence. Learn to ignite the living spark of wisdom, a new narrative for fulfillment contained in Sanskrit and the ancient, powerful, engaging, and fun conscious conversations to discover your own magnificent true self. Learn to dispel the fear shadow as Sarah provides essential knowledge about embracing change and the power of transformation. Get ready. Conscious confidence starts now.
Wow, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome. For those of you that were watching us on Facebook or listening on transformationtalkradio.com or any of the other channels that you might be tuning in, KKNWM 1150, we want to welcome you back. In the past hour, we were talking about 2018. Thanks to Claire Candy coming in and setting the stage for today's show with my friend, colleague, most incredible person, the one that is behind creating conscious confidence in a way we can understand it, and that is Sarah Main. Today, the question mark has to be, if you're doing or seem to be doing everything in your checklist, but things just don't seem to be shifting for you, what might that be? Today, Sarah is going to take us on a journey down the pathway of what she is calling the fear shadow, and tell us about how it interferes with our conscious confidence, with confidence all around, and what is it for us that we don't know about this, but think we've got fear licked. Sarah, great to have you here. What a super show. This is such an important conversation about an aspect of fear that we don't talk about at all.
Hi, Pat. It's lovely to be with you today. We're going to talk about fear and the fear shadow. And most people don't think of the fear shadow. They just think of fear. There's fear and that's it. But I like to say that fear has a shadow. And it's like conscious confidence is like the sun, ever shining, ever present. That's yourself. And then there's the fear shadow, and the fear shadow is like clouds. It comes and it goes. But a lot of the time it hangs over us a bit like a cloudy day. And clouds can feel sun, and it's like the sun's gone away. But actually, it's just the clouds hiding the sun. And actually, conscious confidence, like the sun, is always there. It just appears like it isn't. And it feels like it isn't. And it seems like it isn't. But actually, it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about conscious confidence before we, jump into it, because some folks may have heard you talk about conscious confidence before, and there's many ways people can find out more about this on your website. But this idea of conscious confidence is different from simply pulling the word confidence out and have it be a thing.
Yeah, conscious confidence is drawn from yourself. Think of a great tree with deep roots. The tree grows and it can sway in the wind. It doesn't matter what storm is blowing and comes and goes. But the tree stands tall and proud and strong and resilient and can move with the storms and also provide food and shelter to anyone who needs it. And conscious confidence is those roots deep within ourselves, and we can draw on timeless wisdom to plant that tree and deepen those roots. And it's a presence within ourselves. It doesn't matter what's happening. There's a presence and a strength and a resilience within ourselves. And the fear shadow just comes over like clouds and hangs over us, and we can live under that fear shadow our whole life. It can seem like it's a slightly less cloudy day some days, or it can be quite a dark, cloudy day some days. But that doesn't mean the sun isn't shining. It's just being covered over by this shadow, by these clouds.
We were talking about
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day, and I was telling you that I live in Seattle. I live in the Pacific Northwest, right? And, I moved here from the East Coast, who on the East Coast of the United States is known for it's just fantastic sunrises, right? And so we're reminded here that the sun does exist by our sunsets, because even some days when it's a cloudy, it's overcast, it's hard to remember that there really is a sun and that, we live in the shadow of this consciousness that if we don't understand it or can't really understand how it affects our lives, then we think, for example, fear, we think it's a one-time event, we should get over it and we should move on. But today's show is really to talk about the many, many shades of fear that can show up in a fear shadow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a fear event, and they're fully recognizable, and it appears as fear and anxiety, and there's a fight, flight, fear response. That's all well documented. It's acknowledged. We all experience it. And if we're facing an actual physical threat, it's a fantastic natural autonomic response in us to get out of the way. The adrenaline floods, our thoughts can race, our breathing becomes shallow, and, we can run away from a tiger, let's say, if we were threatened by a tiger. But a lot of the time, with the fear shadow, we're imagining things that simply aren't there. And it's this false evidence appearing right. I know people say false evidence appearing real. I'm saying false evidence appearing right. So right that we just don't question it. And we can live our whole life under that shadow in one form or another. There's a analogy which is so helpful and really sums up the situation. It's called a snake and the rope, the analogy of the snake and the rope. You've got to imagine, say you're in the countryside and you're walking down a laneway. You have to set the scene. You're in the countryside walking down a laneway and it's twilight. And twilight's a very important element of the story. So it's not fully dark and it's not full sunlight. It's twilight. So it's a bit dim and you're not seeing everything very clearly. And up ahead, you see a shape and then immediately you think that's a snake. You see something lying on the road and it's long and thin. And immediately snake jumps into your mind. And immediately you're filled with panic because you've had some experience before or you've picked up some meaning about snake from childhood, and it immediately fills you full of panic and dread about the snake. And then you keep walking or you move aside, and that panic actually alters the action that you take at that time, and you actually change your course as you're walking along the pathway. And as you get closer, you start seeing the situation slightly better, that it hasn't moved. Okay, maybe it's not a snake. You don't know. But you're still full of panic. Your heart's pounding, you're clammy, all that sort of thing. And then you get up close and you have a look and you think, hang on a second. So you're closer now and you're actually looking at the situation and you pull the side of the torch and you see it's a piece of rope that's just been carelessly thrown on the ground. And all of a sudden, different meaning. It's rope. That reality has suddenly changed from a snake to a rope, and your response has equally changed, and you're filled with relief, so on and so forth. Well, I'm talking about the fear shadow is that twilight the whole time, not seeing things accurately and misinterpreting, having incomplete understanding, incomplete meanings, sometimes inaccurate meanings for the things in our life. And we're having these fear responses to everything, and they're not actually there. Because if there is an actual threat, you want to have that fear response because you want to get away from the threat. That is a natural life and death, survival mechanism. Fine. and that will pass as soon as the threat passes.
Yeah.
But we're living in this sometimes low level, sometimes quite high level anxiety and fear all the time, and it's based on these misinterpretations, these shadows.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is get the torch and switch it on. And that's why it's conscious confidence.
Yeah. I love that we're talking about this, because so often we wonder about, why is it I'm not able to move forward in my life? I just got past that thing. I should be able to move forward. It's just like, come on, I don't understand it. But for some reason we can't. And I think what we're talking about today, and what you just were talking about, is that this fear shadow completely darken our entire life.
Yeah.
Right. And without that understanding of that and how to move beyond it, we stay stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Our eyes adjust to that darkened state.
Mm-hmm.
We're not used to the light.
Mm-hmm.
So we're having little flashes of light enough to get through life. So we say, oh, okay, maybe it's not a snake, maybe it's a lizard. Well, I'm not so scared of lizards. You still haven't actually fully seen that it's a rope.
Right. And there's a usual approach to fear that we have, right? It's, sometimes it's to focus on what makes us fearful, whether it's a snake or a spider. But we have a pretty conventional approach to fear, let's say, generally speaking. Tell us a little bit about that, because what we're going to talk about today is different.
Yeah. Well, the approach I'm taking from Timeless Wisdom is that when fear is there, okay, that's an experience, an emotion, and there might be something that for some reason that triggers that fear response. But that is transitory. It's passing. It's not the real you. It's not the truth. It's not the reality. Because your true self doesn't get flooded with fear. Fear may pass over. There may be an experience of fear. I'm not denying that, but I'm saying your true self is like that deep, strong tree that doesn't need to personally get fearful. Storms may come and go. It's not sunny days every single day, but the strength and the life force flowing through that tree from those deep roots, it doesn't matter what's passing over. And the fear is just transitory, like thinking the rope was a snake. And the magic about switching the light on, it didn't make that piece of rope turn into a snake. It never was a snake in the first place.
Yeah.
It was always a piece of rope.
I know, but even when we discover it's a piece of rope, somehow we still think it's a snake. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about fear. What is fear? And then what is it about the fear shadow, living within the fear barrier, that we are so aware of at some level, but so unaware what to do about it? Sarah Main is in the house. You're listening to Conscious Confidence Radio. I'm Dr. Pat. I get to co-host with her. We're going to take a short break, everyone. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to, and this is such a cool show today. You're listening to Conscious Confidence Radio, a timeless wisdom with Sarah Main, my co-host. I'm Dr. Pat. Today, we're talking about understanding the fear shadow. And how is that different than understanding what we think we know about fear? But before we jump ahead, I want to make sure, Sarah, people have ways to find out more about you, more about your work, all of the above. So let us know that. And then we're going to jump back into the fear shadow here.
Okay, well, people can go to my website, sarahmain.com. That's sarahmane.com, sarahmain.com. And there's podcasts for the radio show, and there's also information about conscious confidence, fear and the fear shadow, and the F.U.S.E program. So it's all there on the website.
Awesome. For those of you that want to find out more about us, you can go to Transformation Talk Radio, the Dr. Pat Show. Both of those will get you there. If you want to find out more about the bigger picture, go to thetransformationnetwork.com. Sarah, we started to talk about conscious confidence and the fear shadow in the previous segment. And, now what we're looking at is, traditionally we refer to fear, we have a sense of it, and we even have an acronym for it. But you have a different way of looking at this, especially based on timeless wisdom. Tell us how your view of fear might be different than a conventional look at it.
Well, one of the ways people describe fear is false evidence appearing real. And I'm looking at it as false evidence appearing right. But if we go back to the snake and the rope analogy that we had in the first segment, where in the twilight, when things aren't fully clear, when we're not fully in the light, and the fear shadows concealing conscious confidence, like the clouds concealing the sun, or we're walking in twilight, so it's not full daylight, but then it's not full nighttime where it's completely dark. We're in this sort of grey twilight, and everything that we see, we just accept the twilight. Our eyes have become adjusted to that, so that we're determining right and wrong, the truth of things, according to that dimness. And so what we see is not always accurate, and therefore we make it right as to wrong. And it's in that rightness that we just don't question what we're actually seeing. And that rightness is based often on incomplete knowledge. It's incomplete information. Usually, quite innocently and naturally, that incomplete understanding, that incomplete meaning has come from childhood, where we've just gone through childhood, and in relation to our capacity as a child at the time, we've taken on a certain understanding. But by the time we get to adulthood, we go to sleep and we accept that twilight of understanding, which is not full sunlight of understanding. It's not complete understanding. And so therefore, we're walking through life, proceeding through down that path, that journey of life, with the torch now thinking that twilight is, it's true, it's right. And everything we're seeing, and we're seeing a lot of pieces of rope as snakes. We're seeing snakes everywhere. And it's bringing about this fear response, this panic response, or just low-level concern, worry, anxiety, and that escalates into full-blown anxiety conditions. I know that. But in the end, what timeless wisdom says is that it is all seeing pieces of rope, which is the reality, the truth at the time, the rightness at the time. We're seeing them as snakes, and we're having those fear responses. Because the brilliance about the timeless wisdom, we don't see that snake, that piece of rope, as a stick. We see it as a snake. So it is something that engenders fear. Because there's a lot of things, that analogy could have picked something other than a snake, but it chose a snake. Mm-hmm. And we're just seeing those all the time as we're walking through the road of life in that twilight. And the importance of conscious confidence is getting into the sunlight. It's getting that torch out. And eventually you don't need the torch because you're in sunlight. And that's the sunlight of conscious confidence, which is yourself. And this is timeless wisdom has got it all covered. That timeless wisdom has covered this for millennia, for centuries. There's never not been this knowledge, this wisdom. It's there all the time for humanity to be free, so that we don't have to live in this twilight, this darkness, this semi-shadow the whole time. And we get used to just this low level of fear. Yeah. So that we're used to a sort of level of distraction rather than focus. We just take that as normal, where we get used to a level of division within ourselves and division in our lives rather than unity. We just think that's normal. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be. We get used to a level of sort of complication and confusion rather than simplifying. And we get used to a level of weakening and lack of energy and lack of creativity and dynamism in our life, rather than, energizing and living. And those 4 factors of focusing, uniting, simplifying, energizing, they're the 4 pillars of conscious confidence, and they're there all the time once that fear shadow lifts. But we're just used to living under this fear shadow, and it creates a barrier, and we just stay within this twilight, and we make a little sort of safety zone and a comfort zone in that shadow, rather than boldly stepping into the light of ourselves.
Yeah. What I like about this is that, as we look at fear and, we're faced with fear at many, many different stages of our lives. And, you and I were talking during a break about, what happened here in the United States in Florida. And, people have a fear of guns. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about those things that we believe will do us harm. But what we are talking about is creating this ongoing dialogue with ourselves that overshadows everything we do. And, for many of us that have suffered trauma, we're not talking about diminishing what those kids actually experience. That's not what we're talking about here.
No.
But we're talking about an inability, even decades later for some people, where we still can't move. We carry a negative attitude, right? We're carrying a vibration of negativity, and sometimes we don't know why. We don't know why we are negative. And it may be as a result of the job you lost or something in your childhood. But you help people understand what this shadow is and then to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no denying that events happen. That's why if you go back to the analogy of the tree, storms happen, tempests happen, traumatic events happen, and they're beyond our control, our apparent control. So these things happen, but it's how we respond to them, how we're able to move on from them, how we can grow from different. Because the event occurs, but then what?
Yeah.
And it, depending on the intensity of the event, there is a period of time to assimilate what's happened, to learn from it, whatever it is, to be able to move on. I know that, and I know from my own experience. We're dealing with energy here, and sometimes that energy just takes longer to find its release. But if we stop and allow the intensity and the energy of the event, the trauma, to affect us, then we become fixed in a situation that is naturally coming and going. And to be able to and readiness and ourselves that doesn't get diminished despite the trauma, that is the real challenge. Yeah. And that's where the timeless wisdom has been gently telling people and making that knowledge available forever.
Well, I think that what we're talking about, and we're going to talk more about this when we come back, is how we live under the fear shadow. We live under this fear shadow, but we don't know we are. We don't know what's behind it. We certainly don't know that, we have a positive and negative side to who we are. And then more importantly, I want to walk through what it means, focusing, uniting, simplifying, energizing, and talk about how those insights and the ancient timeless wisdom associated with meaning in Sanskrit can open up a door and really shine the light, and completely disperse the shadow. We're going to take a short break, everyone. When we're back, more with Conscious Confidence, Sarah Main, and all of you. If you have a question, comment, 1-800-930-2819, or send your comment to Facebook. We'll be right back. Love that, Benny. It's so Benny. That's so Benny. That's such a Benny song. For those of you out there, Conscious Confidence Radio, Timeless Wisdom with Sarah Main, my co-host joining me here today. I'm Dr. Pat. Today, we're talking about understanding the fear shadow. Sarah, I am struck by a couple things. One is I'm really struck by how fearless the athletes appear to be in this year's Olympic. I mean, really. And I'm just watching so much of what you're talking about today come through in these incredible athletes, Olympians, whatever the names are that we want to call them. And, I was thinking about this one athlete, I think her name was Jamie Alexander. Jamie Anderson, maybe, that they interviewed, and she was talking about how it's scary to do that high flying, freestyle and ski thing there at this location. And what she said was, there's not enough nature around. It's like you just got to climb up to this thing. She said, I'm used to nature, but I do it anyway. That's what we're talking about today. The fear shadow. What does it mean to live under the fear shadow? When covered by the clouds of the fear shadow, what happens? What are some of the core values at the center of this? And Sarah, I guess the question is, and based on your experience in working with people, we probably hang out in the fear shadow more than we thought, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a gloomy thing to say, but look, compared to the full sunlight of our potential, the answer is yes. Unless we have a passion for something to such an extent that we will overcome a lot of our fears that keep us. So, for example, those skiers that will go up to those incredible heights and then zoom down a mountain, and those ones that do all that, the tumble turns and so on in midair, and then land onto sort of essentially two pieces of flat wood and slide off. Unless we have a passion and a drive and a love for something that will get us to transcend our fears, generally speaking, we keep ourselves well within a fear barrier that is nice and safe, where things are nice and controlled. We know what's going on. And if we don't know what's going on, we get quite agitated and worried. But that fear shadow derives from a lack of self-knowledge, and that is very simple. We are ourselves all the time, but it's just a lack of connection with that is the start of the fear shadow. It's not turning the torch on and shining it at the what we think is a snake, and to see it's a rope. We just stand there in the twilight thinking that that's a snake, and that we do it with ourselves through that lack of a connection with who we really are and what's important to us. And then from that, we tend to have a sort of rather defensive view of the world. It can be a rather negative attitude. We're very reactionary based on fear. So it rolls out from that lack of connection with who we are, living under this low-level greyness of the fear shadow, then starts affecting everything that we do and affecting our choices. And we just keep ourselves nice and safe. And there's no need for us to sort of wrap ourselves up in a sort of a blanket of safety, because we're trying to protect ourselves from a fear shadow that isn't really there. Because our real self is shining strong the whole time. And it doesn't matter what storms are coming, we're strong enough to be able to keep walking through them.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this because, many of us grow up, and people tell me I have a little stronger tolerance for things that they're mostly afraid of. And I actually attribute that to growing up in a city. What is it? The city that never sleeps, right? Where, the stimulation of sound and, it just doesn't bother us. Those of us grew up in New York City. It's the quiet that scares us. But at some level, we're looking at all of the many things, the many wonderful things we want to do in life. And for whatever reason, we're immobilized. We can't do it.
Yeah.
And, what you do is you've been able to set in place a way of working with people of all ages, and especially children, if I might say, about how to move beyond whatever that is that's holding us back. And you have created an approach to doing that. Tell us about that.
Well, the approach and for children, it's easy because the connection with themselves is still there. If they get frightened, you can bring them back to themselves. And it's interesting you should talk about coming from a city that doesn't sleep and the noise, and because it does start with the stillness that is within yourself, and that's a deep stillness. And stillness and quiet doesn't mean a lack of noise. You can be in the middle of the busiest, loudest street in a city, in a huge city, and feel utterly still, because the stillness and quietness is within yourself, and you can move and talk and engage and do all these wonderful things, and it doesn't leave you. That stillness is part of the light of yourself. And ancient wisdom has discovered it's constantly reminding and telling us all the time about that. And it's that connection within ourselves is the starting point. And then from that, so that's a level of our being, a connection with our being and what's important to us, what's dear in our hearts, I'm saying values. That's the starting point. That's your platform. And then choosing the thoughts that we have in our mind, choosing our attitude. And we can do that. We can 100% choose our attitude every moment of the day. And then from there, focusing, being able to give undistracted attention, and the incredible strength that comes from that, the flow of our consciousness. And I taught children for years, and one of the key things was to teach them to pay attention to what they were doing at the time. And children just took to that naturally, not a problem. Then it's uniting. So seeing where the divisions are, especially within ourselves, and bringing things together, uniting all the time, finding the common points to bring us all together rather than the divisions. Then simplifying, letting go of anything that's unnecessary, and often that's a lot of stuff from the past just to start with. So things from the past and concerns for the future, coming into the present moment, getting nice and simple and straightforward and uncluttered. And then with those forces of focusing, uniting and simplifying, then the natural response then is energizing, and an incredible energy comes forward. And those athletes that you were talking about at the Olympics, when they're focused on their goals and the sport that they have such a love and a passion for, those elements are coming quite naturally to the fore. They're incredibly focused and disciplined. They have an incredible unity and strength within themselves and with their other teammates. They're able to not be concerned about things from the past. They get on with what's in the present, and then this energy to perform and engage in their sport fully. It all comes to the fore. So I'm suggesting we can all be athletes in the way we live our lives. We don't need to stay within this little safety zone of comfort and security and that we've created under this fear shadow. We don't need to live like that. We can live boldly, like we're at the top of the mountain in our ski suit with the wind blowing and the snow. We can live like that all the time.
Mhm. I love that. And I love the feeling as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you describe it, Sarah. It's that feeling of being able to go with the wind, to know that we can have that level of, wind under our wings and really soar,
Absolutely.
fly high above the
Absolutely.
fear shadow, right? Fly
Absolutely.
high above it. When we come back, we're going to talk about, how do we step forward, dispel the fear shadow. And Sarah's got something special to help with all of that. You're listening to Conscious Confidence Radio. I'm Dr. Pat. Sarah Main here with me. When we come back, that and much more. Hey, everybody, I'm Dr. Pat. Welcome back. Welcome back. For more information about us, you can go to transformationtalkradio.com or thedrpatshow.com. For more information about Sarah, you could go to sarahmain.com, and it's SARAHMANE.com. Certainly find out lots there. And then you could also Google Conscious Confidence, take a look and a listen to any shows you may have missed. Today, we're talking about the fear shadow, what to do about it, what to know about it, and, what is the F.U.S.E program, how all of the above comes together so that you're not immobilized in your life, so that you can move forward, so that there are things to look forward to. Sarah, this is really part of tapping into ancient wisdom, and ancient wisdom that was used thousands of years ago, but tapping into it in a way where we understand how to bring it up to contemporary times and use that same wisdom in today's world. That's really the beauty of this, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. The Sanskrit is just one expression of ancient wisdom, but it's the most amazing, wonderful expression. And the Sanskrit has the meanings, the full meanings. When I was talking before about the incomplete meanings, like looking at the snake and the rope, that is a traditional analogy that's actually in Sanskrit. It's in several of the Sanskrit scriptures and wisdom traditions. And it's just a simple analogy, but the implications in terms of coming out of the fear shadow and the illusory nature of the fear shadow that traps us into the light of reality is all held in the elements of that analogy. I just use the word torch rather than lamp or something like that because that's more contemporary. But that is actually from Sanskrit. But what I've done with the F.U.S.E program and with the Conscious Confidence program is I've just taken the Sanskrit, the key words in Sanskrit, and just gone back to the roots of each of the words as you do in Sanskrit. And it's like turning the torch on. It's not hard, and you don't have to become a Sanskrit scholar. I've done enough work. I mean, I'm not a full Sanskrit scholar. I would never claim to be, but I know enough to be able to find the meaning. And that's how I was taught, to actually go back and revisit the meanings that we have unconsciously that form part of this fear shadow that we live in and this fear barrier that we stay safely within, to go back and revisit the meanings and refresh, revise, and discover new meanings that blow open all the barriers, and suddenly freedom is possible. And it's all through liberating our thinking from these incomplete meanings, this incomplete knowledge as it's described in the wisdom traditions. And then then every moment of our life is full of possibility. And Conscious Confidence, the F.U.S.E program, is derived directly from all of that. It's very simple, very practical. And it comes down to establishing our core values. That's being. Choosing a positive attitude. That's choosing. So being, choosing. Then focusing. We only think of focusing as an act of giving, but that's exactly what it is. So being, choosing, giving. Then uniting, which is embracing. Then simplifying, which is staying with the essentials and letting go. So staying with and letting go. And then energizing is living. So it's actually very simple and very practical, and it's purely self-directed, because I know from my years of teaching that you don't want someone lecturing you, not as an adult. You don't need someone lecturing you and telling you. This is purely self-directed so that you become fully empowered yourself. And it's discovering that knowledge and that wisdom within yourself. And that's what those wisdom traditions are all about, is rediscovering wisdom within yourself.
Yeah,
so that's what the F.U.S.E program is all about.
Well, one of the things I want to get back to you about too is, this idea of choosing a positive attitude. I was talking with someone this morning, and it was really clear that the idea of choosing a positive attitude was out of the realm of possibility, because one's life was really not equal to a positive life, therefore choosing a positive attitude. So there's this confusion we have around positive attitude and what seems to be going on in the outside circumstances. And they're not the same, right? One is a choice. The other one may not be, your outside circumstances, so to speak.
Exactly. But then if we're so focused on the outside circumstances, we've forgotten who we are, and we become, our sense of identity and being is being determined by the outside circumstances. And this is about coming back to a sense of being in ourselves that is not dependent on the outside circumstances, is not determined or dependent on the outside circumstances.
Wow.
So that is the crucial thing. And I've taught this to children and adults for decades. So it is possible.
Well, today we've talked about a lot, and you have something special for us now.
Yeah.
Something that is personal to you, but enlivening to our audience. And it's a special traditional prayer. I'd love for you to share that with us. And thank you for today.
Thank you. Well, it's called the Perfect Prayer, and it's the prayer that opens the Isha Upanishad, which is one of the great Upanishad from the wisdom traditions. It's in Sanskrit. And in English, it is, that is perfect, this is perfect. Perfect comes from perfect. Take perfect from perfect. The remainder is perfect. May peace and peace and peace be everywhere. And I'll sing it for you in Sanskrit. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Sarah, thank you for a great show. Thank you for today. Thank you for all that you do. For those of you out there, if you want to find out more about Sarah, please go to our website, sarahmain.com, and choose that positive attitude today for yourselves. Choose to be in the sunlight, regardless of what you think is overshadowing your life. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Dr. Pat.